Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey, what's up, guys? Back with another talking head video here, and got a few short questions here this evening, but first and foremost, I hope you guys are all doing okay out there. And as always, please send me your questions either in YouTube comments below or bishopshomegrown@gmail.com or any of my social media. Glad to answer them to the best of my ability about the art of distillation and help you out in any way that I can. It's a passion for me. I love helping people with questions about distillation as much as I love distillation. So anyways, 2026 Practical Distillers and Alchemist Almanac. It's at the printer now. Should be printing anytime now. Should be coming here to Kim and I very shortly, and then it'll be up for you guys to order. Not going to take orders until I have physical copies in hand, so that they go out the minute that we get your order in this year. So that's the nature of it. But the cool thing is you're going to have it before the beginning of the year, which is it took us 3 years to get to that point, but we were figuring it out slowly but surely. But anyways, let's get into some questions here. So from Andy, hey Alan, love watching the channel. Hope you're having a good time with your new distillery. I can't read tonight apparently. I am having a great time with Old Homestead, which by the way you can check out at oldhomesteaddc.com. I recently distilled 6 gallons of rum. The rum was made with 30% fancy molasses and 70% blackstrap, double pot still. Came out really nice. I've been pretty into making my own Badmo barrels. I've even designed and 3D printed some pretty handy jigs to make the process easier. Well, that's very cool. I have stock of good quality New American Oak, ex-bourbon barrel wood, and ex-rye barrel wood. I plan to make 3 barrels. My first question is, what type of wood do you think would be the best for this rum? Second question is, if you think new oak would be good to use, what would be good toast/char levels to try with this rum? I guess it depends on where you're going to age it at and how heavy-bodied the rum is, right? So if it's pot-stilled rum, it's going to be fairly heavy-bodied. Especially since you use quite a bit of blackstrap in there. It would hold up to a new oak barrel, but I wouldn't go a 3 char or 4 char. I would do like a 2 char or 1 char on it, or go ex-bourbon barrel or ex-rye barrel. Actually, ex-rye barrel would be really cool with rum, I think. So kind of an inverse Angel's Envy, right? So Angel's Envy does rye aged in rum barrel, although I'm pretty sure they're using a flavoring agent there, let's say it that way. That's my opinion. But rye barrel might be interesting, or maybe even integrating both a little bit of number 2 char new oak and a little bit of that rye at the same time. I could really see those rye notes coming through nicely, while that new oak knocked down some of the higher alcohols, and maybe some potential rough spots in that rum. So great question. I'm glad to hear that there's people out there making their own Badmo barrels too. That's something that Ben would have absolutely adored that you guys were doing. I wish I were more inclined to do some woodworking and things of that nature, or that I had time to do it. I would make some of my own myself for sure. So great question, man. Let's see what else we got here. So hey Alan, this is from Tereso. Quick question on line arms. Your last video you spoke on conical versus pipe line arms. I have about 9 foot of 3-inch copper pipe in various sizes I made for thumpers or VM reflux. My question is, if I added some copper tabs to the interior to disrupt vapor flow, would that accomplish anything good? Mainly want to make rum and rye. Hope you and your family rock this autumn. All right, from Terry, actually. See, that was, I just saw that. Anyways, fantastic. I really appreciate that. The good fall and all that stuff. I'm losing my train of thought, guys. I apologize, because I'm getting excited I'm getting ready to go bike riding here in a minute. I'm continuing my little physical journey here, and I didn't get to go last night, so I'm excited I get to go tonight. It's like an adventure every time I get to go. Anyways, fantastic question here. So in terms of tabs, yeah, I think that there's some potentiality to that, right? Anything that could sort of like slow that vapor flow a little bit, or anything particularly that could cause swirling of vapor, right? So if you put tabs in there, if you were to do them in, say, like a spiral going around, right, to where the vapor that hits them sort of slows things down and causes a turning action, right? That could be really interesting. That puts you in contact with copper for a lot longer, in particular, is where my brain goes. If you're dealing with tabs on, say, like when I think spiral, you could do that on any angle that you wanted to, and that would work. But I'm thinking particularly too, the other thing that you could do is having tabs on a 45-degree angle going up. They don't have to be spiral, but just tabs going up, one side, and then you're forcing some vapor to slow down and cool down and getting a little bit of active reflux. Not quite like a deflag or anything like that, but maybe just bumping your proof 1 or 2 proof points and getting a little cleaner product out of it might be kind of a cool use for something like that too. There's some great theoretical questions in this batch of questions here, between that and then what barrel to use, what wood to use for rum, and those are things I really appreciate, are those theoretical questions. So I like working with Wayne from Ozark Steelworks. I'm not a great coppersmith. I like beating and banging around on copper and building some primitive stuff here and there, but I always have ideas in my head that I don't know how to make or how to engineer, but I can call Wayne at Ozark Steelworks and be like, hey man, I have this crazy idea, can you make it happen? And he almost always does, man, constantly. So let's see, one more, and this one's from the actual comments on one of the previous videos. So Girth Brooks 8795. When first processing your apples, do you core them to remove seeds before slicing up and cooking for mash, or you just leave the works to ferment? I use a dedicated garburator set up to process my apples, and I'm thinking of the potential for arsenic and seed components because the seeds will be crushed, cooked, fermented, etc., versus just the pressed cold cider, which I've traditionally done. Secondly, do you rack your mash off the yeast cake at all? You mentioned only letting it ferment for a week and then running it. Can you clarify how long you give it, or maybe initial gravity versus where you like it to go before you run it? So a lot of these are questions that I've answered in various videos in the past, but I don't mind to go over stuff multiple times at all, because I know a lot of people, there's a lot of information on this channel, right? And having the time to go through all that and digest all of it sometimes is a lot to ask of people. So when it comes to the protocyanide, I can't remember the compound off the top of my head right now, but we talked about it a few times on the channel. I typically don't really worry about it, to tell you the truth. I really don't. I used to core apples a lot and all that stuff, but the more that I saw the traditional Black Forest method, those guys never did that. The more that I read about protocyanide, it has to be distilled at such a high temperature to extract it that I'm just not worried about it. Now, if I were going to make it for cider or for wine, yeah, I might have a little more concern with that, but since I'm distilling it, and since that particular compound distills at a crazy high temperature, I'm not really worried about it. People drank it for years and years and years, never had any issues, never seen any problems with it one way or the shape, form, or the other. Time period as far as fermentation goes, it really just depends, because I'm not, I don't have any active heating or cooling when it comes to that, say at Old Homestead Distillery in the wooden barrels. And at home, when I was distilling at home, it was either outside, so sometimes it's real hot, or it was in the basement, and sometimes it's pretty cool, right? A week to 2 weeks tops generally is where I would say until you're finished, and that also depends on whether or not you're adding any sugar to it or capitalizing the product in any way, shape, or form. As far as the yeast cake, so when possible, I always distill on the fruit if I have the equipment to do it, right? At Old Homestead, I certainly have the equipment to do it, and as such, all of that goes into the still. I will tell you that in brandy producing countries, let's say Normandy, for example, in France, and also in Cognac, the Lees is considered some of the highest quality brandy that you can make. It's often marked as its own batch, right? Because it's such a rich, heavy distillate. It's used for blending or those sort of things. I always distill everything that I can possibly put in there. Unless I'm running on something that I don't have agitation in, or I don't have a false bottom or a jacket in, then I'm probably not going to run those sort of solids like that and risk scorching, so to speak. But where possible, I include all of it. As far as the specific gravity, so I talked about the gravity of apples before. You're not going to get a real high specific gravity if you're doing a fruit mash brandy and you're not adding sugar or molasses or honey or something of that nature. 1040, 1050. That's going to be on the high end, probably. 1055, maybe, if you're cooking them down like I do. Now, if you want a higher gravity than that without sugar, cook them down and evaporate some of the water off of that mash that you're making, right? Basically make a concentrate. Nothing wrong with that. But the thing that I want people to realize too, because you got to understand I do a lot of historic style distillation as well. So if you go back into the 1800s and you're really looking at what these guys were doing, whether it's whiskey or whether it's brandy, quite often the ABV was very low on their washes, their mashes, their brandies, etc. Because they didn't have efficient fermentations, they didn't have highly adapted yeast, they didn't have great temperature control, but just as much so, they couldn't leave a lot of solids in. They could leave some solids in if they're running on the old turnip style pot stills, because you can stir them until they get up and boiling. But because they couldn't put a whole lot of solids in there without scorching, especially on open flame, and it's not even during the heat up or the distillation process where you get scorching, it is actually after you get done distilling, as that fire is dying down. As soon as you start to let that fire die down, what happens? That boiling action stops, and all those solids that were in suspension that you kept stirred up until it got boiling and were stirred up on their own by the boiling process, they fall to the bottom and they scorch. So 1040, 1050, 1055, that's traditional specific gravity for apple mash brandies, for whiskeys in general, at least within the research that I've done over the years, and it's also within the experience of having run pot stills of that nature, say at Mount Vernon or Locust Grove or at home over the years. You know, you can go higher, but you're asking for problems. So just bear all of that in mind. But anyways, guys, great set of questions. Always happy to answer questions. And like I said, even if they're repeat questions, I don't mind to answer them multiple times, because it just, you know, new people come to the channel all the time. They don't want to dig through hundreds of videos that I've done and try to find the one weird time that I said something that, you know, is buried amongst 5 other topics in a video. So, but as always, thank you for your support and keep the questions coming. Love y'all. Later.